Welcome, welcome, welcome. I would like to welcome you to episode 406 of the Unpopular Podcast. This is the man, the myth, the legend, Jalen Hunter. And here at the Unpopular Podcast, I'm not really asking you to agree with me. I'm asking you to hear me out. People ask why college sports, in a lot of instances, is more popular than professional sports. Or why something like March Madness gets more views, more ratings, more interest than something like the NBA playoffs. And while, yes, betting, gambling, the whole one and done notion is definitely a huge part in that argument. So I'm not here saying that it's not. But one thing that makes college sports different than professional sports is tradition. Now, I'm not saying that professional sports doesn't have tradition, but tradition isn't viewed the same way in the NBA or the NFL than it is in college football or college basketball. Tradition is one thing that brings college sports together. Whether that, there are universal traditions, there are just traditions that your school might have or your favorite school might have. Traditions shape college sports. And that's one reason I'll say why people have such a attachment to them. One tradition that not only is one of the most popular traditions in college sports, but has gotten the most, let's say, scrutiny, and I'll say over the last week or so, is court storming. Court storming has been a part of not just court storming, it's field storming. When you are the viewed as the lesser team, when you are viewed as the underdogs, and say a major school or say like a Duke, a North Carolina, a Kentucky comes to your school and you're the lesser school in a lot of rankers' eyes, and you win, whether that's in football, whether that's in basketball, the tradition usually is for the crowd to storm the field or to storm the court. It is a form of unity with your crowd. It's a sense of elation, seeing as though you are celebrating with the players after reaching a feat that was viewed as unlikely. It's a tradition that has happened since God knows how long. I'm sure that there is an origin to this, but I don't know the origin. And this tradition has been under a lot of scrutiny over the last, let's say, week or two, because I believe it was Wake Forest against Duke. Wake Forest was viewed as the lesser team. Wake Forest was at home. Duke was ranked 8th at the time. They are, University of Duke. When you hear Duke, that's one of those schools, the Blue Bloods, the prestigious school. A school with a lot of history in terms of basketball. When we talk about Coach K and all the great, the pantheon of players that have played at Duke that ultimately went to the NBA. And Wake Forest ultimately beats Duke. And, of course, in fashion and tradition, the crowd storms the court. Now, in this instance, one of the Duke players gets hurt. One of the players collides with a student trying to rush on, celebrating the win, and he gets hurt. This also happened a couple weeks ago with Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark in Iowa lost to, I don't remember the team, and Caitlin Clark and a fan made contact. Now, what has been interesting, to say the least, to see is the discussions, the think pieces, the segments after this. and how this quote unquote is ruining the game of basketball, how this quote unquote needs to be abolished, and how students that aren't athletes shouldn't be on the court. It's been fascinating to not only hear what people feel after this, but to hear who was saying it. Now, I'm not going to go exactly into, like, I'm not going to single out one or two people, but what I will say is this. I'll give my opinion on the situation. I do find it, or I do feel that it is the number one, let's say this, the number one goal, responsibility, duty, I guess you can say, of any school or any program is to ensure the safety of not only your players, but of the opposing players. I understand that people don't really view, or people have a hard time viewing players, whether professionally or in the college ranks, as actual people. But at the end of the day, that's exactly what they are, is people. And you want to make sure that they are in the perfect position to be safe. Whether a win, lose, draw, you want them to be safe. And obviously, I understand that it's very difficult to ensure that someone is going to be safe when you also implement a court storm. Now, let me also add, let me put a little caveat in saying court storms don't always happen. They're a very rare occasion, which makes it even more grand when it happens, because court storms don't happen, or field storms don't happen every day. But again, when you're the home team, whether the home team is the one storming the court or whatever, when you're the home team, your number one goal, and I'm not just talking about the team as far as the actual team, I mean the venue, the school, the organization, the university. Your number one job is to ensure the safety of the people coming to your place, whether that is the students and the athletes. And I understand the difficulties of ensuring that when there is a court storm, because you have hundreds of kids, of students, of, I don't know, family members rushing the field or rushing the court. And I think, in quiet as it's kept, I'm not putting any blame on, the player that got hurt. It looks like he's going to be okay. I think it's Kyle Flakowski from Duke, so I hope he's going to be okay. Well, it looks like he's going to be okay. But I'm not putting any fault on the player getting hurt. I'm glad that he's okay. But what I am going to say is, let me just center on the away team, or the team that is experiencing, or the other end of the court storm. I'm going to address I'm going to finish the home venue, but let me address the away court, or away team, or the team that suffered the loss that is now getting stormed on. I started this by saying tradition. Tradition means this ain't the first time this has happened. Tradition means more than likely it's not going to be the last time. And tradition also means that there's an opportunity of this happening. If you're the better team and you lose, you have to understand. See, I played college basketball. Now, no, I didn't play D1 NCAA. I played D1 NAIA. But there are still similarities. When you come into a court or when you come into an arena and you are favored and you're starting to look up and you start to see, time dwindling and you start to see, okay, we're probably going to lose this game. There are tall tale signs that there is about to be a court storm. Tall tale signs. Now, this is somebody that's been in it. Obviously, you have stands. Fans start to walk closer. Fans start to wall up and start to stand around the baseline and start to stand around the court. They're coming from the top of the stands or from the middle of the stands to baseline pretty much, or to the sidelines. And they're just standing. You see they're anticipating the final buzzer. Just like how you can see it on TV, you see it. Even I know how people say, "Oh, I was too in it." No, you see this is coming. You see that the court is about to get stormed. So, as an away team, as the team that just suffered the loss, it is in your best interest to, as soon as that ball goes up, or as soon as the final buzzer rings, you make a beeline as fast as you can to the locker room. You even saw it with the game in which we're talking about, the Wake Forest against Duke. Proctor. It's a Terrell Proctor that plays for Duke. As soon as the game ended, you saw him sprint, beeline to the sidelines or to the tunnel because he knew what was about to happen. Filipkowski kind of lingered on the court, and it just you have to look. I understand that it is it's the home arena or the arena's job to keep you safe from anything happening off the court, but you have to understand what's about to happen. So what I'm just saying is I'm glad that he's not drastically hurt. I'm glad that he's not, reports are saying it's just he just got bruised up a little bit, but get off the court. Get off the court as fast as you can. And again, I'm not putting blame on it because it can happen to anybody, but you have to put yourself in. You can't. I understand you have to in certain instances, but you can't automatically put your health or put your safety in the arms of somebody else and you don't do nothing. Like, you have to get off the court, bro. Get off the court. Sprint off the court. I understand you're probably soaking in the loss and you probably didn't want to lose, but it happened. So you got to get off. Or you risk what you risk. You risk something like what happened with Flipkowski. You risk something happened to Caitlin Clark 2 times when both players were just lingering on the court after a loss. You got to go. Now, for the home team, or for the team, the arena that is, that the fans are storming the court and field, I feel like, again, I understand that it's rare that it happens. It's not always the case, but you have to have things in place for the safety of the court. I don't remember exactly who said it, but I like the idea of just give them a minute. As soon as the game's over, give them a minute. I hear people say, well, that's going to take away from the excitement. That's going to take away from the joy. No, it won't. You still beat a top-ranked team, or you still beat a team that you didn't expect to beat. Give that team maybe a minute to get off the court. I understand that there's the whole handshake thing and the handshake line. Let the away team get off the court. And then as soon as they get off the court, let them storm the court. Not only does that give them a minute to get off the court, but it also gives your fans a minute to, the anticipation is still building. You still will see those scenes of, you beating a top ranked team and them taking the goalpost out, or it's you just have to be better. You have to be better, and you have to just let them get it. Give them a minute. That's all I'm asking. Give them a minute, and you should be fine. But there has been some crazy. I hear people talking about they should lock up the kids. I hear people saying that. It's also funny. And the last thing I'll say about this is a lot of people that are saying that they should ban court storms, or court storms shouldn't be a thing, are people that have went to schools that traditionally don't do court storms. And there is nothing wrong with going to a school that doesn't do it. There's nothing wrong with, going to a school that might look at it differently. Like North Carolina doesn't do much court storms because they're usually ranked high. Same thing with Duke. Same thing with Kentucky. Those teams don't really do that. But don't take it away from the lesser schools, or the schools that may not be as prominent historically as those schools. So again, I'm all for court and field storms. I want to see. It needs to be safe. That's it. It needs to be safe, and you need to not only look out for the safety of your team and your organization, but also the away team, because you never know. Let's move forward. A question that I've been wrestling with this week is, when is a divorce okay? And I'm not talking about like a marriage divorce. I'm talking about, obviously in the sports realm, a divorce between maybe a player and a team, a player and an organization, The question is, when is a divorce okay? These next few topics, we're going to center around breakups. And we're going to center around, when is it time, or when do you know it's time for a breakup? And I'm going to first start with Russell Wilson. What I've been wrestling with is, some would say that the time when when you know it's time for a divorce is when both sides are done, or both entities, whether the player, the team, two people, both entities would be better off apart. And I think about that, because my question is, who makes that decision? Now, obviously, there are instances where both people come together and say, hey, this ain't working. We need to separate. In that case, I understand completely. But what if one person has expressed that they're not ready to go, or they're not ready for this thing to end, but another person is? In terms of Russell Wilson, I understand what the goal was. I understand when you get a player like Russell Wilson, with the history that Russell Wilson has, and you give up as much that you give up, I understand what the goal is. The goal is high. The goal is essentially you being in the best position to compete for a Super Bowl. You being in the best position to compete amongst the top ranked teams. Because you expect to get a top ranked player, a player that has won a Super Bowl, that's been to essentially 2 Super Bowls. But anyone from here to Denver can see that the relationship between the Denver Broncos and Russell Wilson should be officially over. Now, I've talked ad nauseum about how I feel about Russell Wilson, how I feel his tenure has gone in Denver, how I feel his tenure has gone in Denver with Sean Payton. I've talked about that ad nauseum. So I'm not going to rehash things, but what I will talk about is what do I think should be next for Russell Wilson, or what marriage do I think would benefit Russell Wilson most in the sports world, in the football world? Because while I don't think that when the deal was first made, obviously I don't think made 2 years in, a divorce would be this imminent, or divorce would look this bad. But it is bad, and we are here. The question that you have to ask yourself, and the question that needs to be answered, is can Russell Wilson still play? And I don't mean play just, obviously he can still throw the ball. I mean, that hasn't left. But should Russell Wilson still be viewed as a player that can be a missing piece for a franchise, or be a quarterback that can get you to heights that you essentially are not at without him? I look at last year, or the end of this season, and Russell Wilson statistically was one of the best quarterbacks in football. That doesn't essentially mean that I would pick Russell Wilson over the likes of Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes or a Josh Allen. But I do think that Russell Wilson is still a top tier quarterback. The thing about football that a lot of people overlook when they're discussing a single player is, especially when you're a quarterback, while yes, you can be as great as you can be, you still need help. The reason why they say football is the ultimate team sport is because it doesn't matter how great you are in a certain instance, because if you don't have greatness around you, if you don't have solid pieces around you, you are at a disadvantage. And I'm not throwing anybody under the bus, but look at, maybe by name, the pieces that were around Russell Wilson in Denver by name were good, but look at their play on the field. Now, I'm not absolving Russell Wilson of anything. Russell Wilson was not good, especially a lot that first year. But you also, again, have to look at what was around him. But again, I'm not going to go down that road. What I will say is this. I look at the landscape of the NFL, and I look at the teams that are in desperate need of a quarterback. Now, there are multiple teams that obviously need a quarterback, but there aren't too many teams that are a quarterback away that will take them from one tier, I guess, to another tier. And what I mean by that is, let's look at let's look at the Washington Commanders. Currently constructed. Now, yes, I understand they have a bunch of cap space. They have the number 2 overall pick. But currently constructed, right now, you put Patrick Mahomes on that team, they don't go from, bottom of the barrel team to a Super Bowl contender. They go from bottom of the barrel team to maybe a fringe playoff team, but they don't go from worst to best. It is universal that Patrick Mahomes is the best player in football. But what I'm saying is there is a team, like let's say we put Patrick Mahomes on. Let's say you put Patrick Mahomes on the LA Chargers. To me, they go from where they are to a Super Bowl contender, in my opinion. Could be wrong. That's my opinion. So what I'm saying is, yes, there are teams that need a quarterback, but there aren't a lot of teams that is a quarterback away. And for Russell Wilson, I think that Russell Wilson is still in that realm of he is good enough to be that quarterback that you can look at and say, oh, we're just a quarterback away. I understand that it was ugly in Denver. But I'm also looking at what we saw last year. And I'm looking at the fact of, so where do I think the perfect marriage for Russell Wilson is? I understand that, especially when we talk about quarterbacks, it's a lot deeper than just where you should or should not go, because contracts play a part. And I understand that it's very difficult for a team to tackle the contract that Russell Wilson was given by Denver. Now, you are hearing Russell Wilson say that he is willing to take a vet's minimum, which doesn't really affect any team as far as cap space. And again, I will preface this by saying I do think that Russell Wilson is still one of those quarterbacks that can be that missing piece for a Super Bowl caliber team. But I will say this. Russell Wilson is in that category now. And that is something that I have learned and seen in Denver. Russell Wilson is in that category. While he is still has an opportunity to be great, I think he is in that category that almost everything has to be right around him. Whether it means you have to have a good offensive line, you have to have good pieces, you have to have a good weapons on the outside. Like, Russell Wilson is in that boat now. Now, I think that he is one of the better quarterbacks in that boat, but Russell Wilson is indeed in that boat. And that also narrows the path down a little bit. Which team that needs a quarterback that has almost everything good outside of the quarterback? To me, the answer is clear as day. I think Russell Wilson would be perfect for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Look at the success of Russell Wilson when he was in Seattle. Those Super Bowl teams, what did those teams and the Pittsburgh Steelers had in common? Well, they had a legendary coach, Pete Carroll, Mike Tomlin. They had a very good offensive line. While the offensive line isn't great for Pittsburgh, it's better than what it was in Denver. Now, no, I don't think that this Pittsburgh defense is the Legion of Boom. I'm not going to go that far. But what I will say is this Pittsburgh defense does have TJ Watt, does have Joey Porter Jr., does have Minka Fitzpatrick. It has really good pieces, great pieces. You had an exceptional running back in Marshawn Lynch. Well, no, I'm not saying that Najee Harris is Marshawn Lynch. He is a very capable, very good running back. You know why Pittsburgh fans have been so upset these last, 2 years? It's because they know that they kind of suffer from the Chargers, not Chargers, from what the Jets were suffering from these last 2 years. And the Jets feel like they are a quarterback away. And I essentially do agree. I don't know if at this point of his career if Aaron Rodgers is that quarterback, but I do essentially agree that they are pretty much a quarterback, but they have a great defense. They have really good pieces on the offensive side of the ball. They just need to get that offensive line together and, see what goes on, see what happens with Aaron Rodgers. But the Pittsburgh Steelers, we know about the history and the lineage. They're used to winning. They have been spoiled with winning. And it's tough. I can imagine. I'm a fan of a team that their winning days ended when I was a child. So I'm not used to, I understand the extensive history of Washington, but I'm not used to them being, Super Bowl caliber teams. Pittsburgh Steelers, people that were born in 1990s and they understand. They've seen a Super Bowl. So when you trot out someone like a Kenny Pickett or someone like a Mason Rudolph or someone like a Mitch Trubisky, especially after the long lineage of Ben Roethlisberger, I understand that it's going to be tough. But I think Russell Wilson would be perfect. You have pieces like George Pickens. You have pieces like Deontay Johnson. You have Pat Freiermuth. They have a squad. They just need that quarterback to glue it all together. Now, I will say this, though. And this is where I'm looking solely at Russell Wilson. Personality and likability matters most at the quarterback position than any other position in football. More than likely, the quarterback is usually the most paid, or the highest paid, is usually the most covered, is usually the most seen. A lot of times, the quarterback is the captain of the, at least, offense. Excuse me. So it's very important to be likable, and it's very important to be respected by your teammates. I don't know Russell Wilson personally, obviously. But what I do know is what I've heard from former teammates. And it hasn't been the most glowing review of Russell Wilson's personality when discussing how it is to play with Russell Wilson. And I think that's one thing that has derailed this whole Denver-Russell Wilson marriage. I'm not going to say this is a wake-up call or whatever, but what I will say is maybe, when you get paid as much as Russell Wilson has been paid in his career and you're willing to take the vet's minimum, maybe that is a sign of saying, hey, I understand where I am and I understand this would be the best for me. But if and when Russell Wilson does get another opportunity, again, I don't know. I'm just going off of what I've heard by a litany of former teammates. You have to be better, and you have to be a better leader as far as personality wise. Because what it seems like, again, I don't know, but what it seems like is the Russell Wilson that we see on camera is much different than the Russell Wilson, or personality, likability wise, is much different than it is in the locker room. And when you're the quarterback, especially the quarterback that makes as much as Russell Wilson made in Denver, and when you are seen as the missing piece, you have to win the locker room. Because if you don't, well, it's going to be tough sledding. I'll just say that. But yeah, I think Russell Wilson would be perfect for the Pittsburgh Steelers. That kind of brings me to my next topic. And we're sticking on the relationship between divorcing and marriages and in sports, obviously. I want to talk about Justin Fields for a second. Because people ask, why do I think that Russell Wilson is a perfect marriage for the Pittsburgh Steelers and not Justin Fields? Because there's a lot of people that view Justin Fields as a better option at this point of his career than Russell Wilson. I don't essentially agree, but I understand where you're coming from. A famous line that I have on this podcast, something that I talk about a lot, is fit. And fit does matter when we talk about for players and for teams. And we also talked about tradition. You know, we started this off with court storming and the tradition of the court storming and why I do think it's important to keep court storming. What makes tradition in football is, or in the NFL, is how your organization has been run, or what is attached to your organization. For instance, the tradition for the New England Patriots, for as long as I've been alive, is winning. That's the reason why we view them as a former dynasty, because when we think about New England Patriots, when we think about Tom Brady, when we think about Bill Belichick, all I've seen, majority of my life, is them winning. Actually, let me say, in the 2000s on, it's been mostly winning. Pittsburgh has a history of winning as well. In fact, they're one of the most winningest franchises in football. I think there may be two. However, they are used to having a quote-unquote adult, a savvy veteran at the quarterback position, whether we talk about. Now, I understand that they drafted Big Ben, but you see how long Big Ben stayed with them. Terry Bradshaw, you know? And when you're a piece away, I think that the patience of an organization, the patience of a fan base is a lot shorter for a younger player than it would be for a veteran. Now, again, I think that Russell Wilson is better than Justin Fields right now. I don't think Justin Fields is terrible, but I do think that Russell Wilson would be a better fit because he is experienced winning at the highest level, and I think that he'll be able to win over fans and win over a locker room faster than a quarterback that's just trying to understand his footing in this NFL landscape. I think you want to bring somebody in, especially for an organization like the Pittsburgh Steelers, that you don't have to have that problem. But let's talk about Justin Fields for a second. This divorce and this marriage has been much different than what we talked about with Russell Wilson and the Seattle Seahawks. There are some marriages that one person is putting their all into it. One person is trying their hardest to make it work. And another person, while they may try, they may not know how to be compatible for that other person. They may not understand what it takes to be with that person. Even though they could be trying, it may not be enough, while the other person is trying as hard as they can. That is an incompatible, I don't even know if that's a word, but incompatible marriage. The difference between Russell Wilson situation and Justin Fields situation is Justin Fields, I feel, has tried to do the best he can. Whether that is as great or whether that is him being great or not, I feel like he's been the best that he's capable of being. However, the Chicago Bears has not held up their end of the marriage. They have not done their part. And the thing about marriage is that a lot of people don't talk about is you are a representation of each other. And if one person is going out sad, if one person just looks terrible, it has a negative effect on the entire relationship. You ever look at I'm not going to say that. But I will just say a husband or a wife does something crazy. 9 times out of 10, they're going to look at the spouse and be like, yo, what is happening? This is you? I know that the Chicago Bears has not done enough to surround Justin Fields with what he is needed to win. Which doesn't make much sense to me, but this is just where we are, because you trade up to get him. You told him as the future of the Chicago Bears, yet and still you start a rebuild with him. And it feels like you keep restarting that rebuild, whether that's trading away important pieces like a Roquan Smith, or not really surrounding him with capable wide receivers, i.e. like Chase Claypool. Now I want you to look at what we saw last year and how some of Justin Fields' best games went hand in hand with some of DJ Moore's best games. I've talked about this ad nauseum. It is so important, especially for a younger quarterback, to have a mature, high-level, elite number one receiver. Now, obviously, they don't grow on trees. But when you have the capability, when you're able to get a player like that, you hold on to it. Because it just... The reason why the reason why safety blankets are so important in life is because they bring on a level of comfort. They bring on a level of security. And when you're comfortable and when you're secure, you're able to what? be your best self at a lot of instances. No one falls asleep when they're uncomfortable. But when you have security, when you have comfort around you, that is when you get your best sleep. As a Washington fan, obviously I would love to see Washington trade up and get Caleb Williams. But if I'm looking solely at this Justin Fields relationship, with the Chicago Bears, I don't think that. I think it's time they need to get rid of Justin Fields, and that's not because Justin Fields is bad. That's because they have not shown the ability to cater to his needs. And I'm not saying that in a diva way. I'm saying that is every quarterback has needs, some more than others. And Justin Fields has needs that the Chicago Bears have not been able to meet. In fact, they met it once and had DJ Moore, and shocker, they have been able to get the best out of Justin Fields in that instance. I will say this. I do think that Atlanta, I mean, obviously that has been the team that has kind of been spiraling for Justin Fields. I think Atlanta would be perfect having Kyle Pitts, and hopefully they're able to get the best out of Kyle Pitts, seeing as though they haven't been able to do it since they drafted him. You have Bijan Robinson, you have Drake London, like they have Cordell Patterson, who was an adult. Like they have a really good organization. It's just they don't have the best offensive line, but it is what it is. I just think that while yes, selfishly, I would love Washington to trade up to get Caleb Williams. But that even in that, obviously, I'm on the outside looking in, but from what we've seen, the way that they've handled Justin Fields, you can think that Caleb Williams is better than Justin Fields and has a higher ceiling than Justin Fields. That's cool. But do you have the confidence in saying that Caleb Williams or the Chicago Bears are going to do everything that is, or they're going to be able to surround Caleb Williams with what he needs, seeing as though they were never really able to do that with Justin Fields outside of these last, 2 years? And again, I will say that in these last year and a half, 2 years, we've seen the best Justin Fields. So I just think that marriage needs to end for Justin Fields and the Chicago Bears. And honestly, I think the Chicago Bears feel the same way. I just don't know if they understand how to surround a young quarterback with talent, since we haven't really seen it. So, but we'll see. We'll see. The last marriage I'm going to discuss is when, again, the theme around this episode is marriage / divorce. That might be that might be the title of this episode. How do I have you ever seen those marriages where both sides know this marriage is over? They just don't want to break, or they just haven't broken up. And for some reason, they just it's like the definition is saying they keep doing the same thing, expecting change, but nothing's going to change. But because both sides know that this marriage, this relationship is over, they don't really try their best at anything. They just coast. They just go through the motions. That marriage, that relationship is never going to improve because they have essentially put their cap on it. Again, there isn't many players that are like Trae Young in the NBA. And I, just like the Atlanta Hawks, understand that. I'm not saying Trae Young is the best, but what I'm saying is there aren't many players like Trae Young just walking around. Being that quick, I understand height is a thing, but being that quick, having the hand dribble ability that he has, having the court vision that he has, and having the range that he has. There aren't many Trae Youngs walking around. And for that, I understand why the Atlanta Hawks may not want to let him go. But I also understand the frustration of, we understand that there's not many. You know what it is? The worst thing that could have happened to the Atlanta Hawks Trae Young relationship is, was it 2020 or 2021? 2021, when the Atlanta Hawks made it to the Western Conference Finals. The Eastern Conference Finals. That is the worst thing that could have happened to this Trae Young and Atlanta Hawks relationship, because it birthed unrealistic expectations. It birthed the expectation that the Atlanta Hawks are a top-tier team and Trae Young is a superstar. And because of that, we should be perennial conference finals. We should be a perennial conference finals team. No. On a lot of those fronts. Trae Young is great. He is not a superstar. Trae Young is a star. He is an all-star. He is not a superstar. Atlanta is nowhere close, even though they do have an infusion of young talent, whether we talk about Bogdanovich, whether we talk about DeJounte Murray, Clint Capella, but they are not a conference championship team, even with Trae Young playing as good as he can play. I mean, as we speak, Trae Young is averaging 26 points a game, which is 11th in the NBA. And he's second in assists. He's averaging 26 and 11 pretty much. But there's a reason why almost every offseason cycle, almost every trade deadline cycle, almost every trade manager, when they come out the woodworks, there's a reason why Trae Young's name is almost always there. I said that when they made the conference finals in, I think, 2021, it bred unrealistic expectations for this team. And seeing as though they haven't been anywhere close since, probably has birthed frustration, not just with the Atlanta organization, but with Trae Young. Again, players understand what's up. Players understand if you're not really in the mindset, in the position to try to win. You can say you are, but actions speak louder than words. And when you trade arguably your second best player in John Collins, or when your current second best player in DeJounte Murray is on the trade block, that should tell you everything you need to know. And when you have a player as good as Trae Young, I would understand that they would probably want to win. And I understand Trae Young is, how old is he? 25 years old. So he's still very young. But there comes a point where you want to play for more. When you get a taste of When you get a taste of something that you haven't had that is extremely good, you want more of that. And again, that's why I said it's a blessing and a curse that the the Atlanta Hawks made it to the conference championship in what 2021. I think that this is the last year. Now you hear, which is crazy. You hear former players, you hear current players talking about the Trae Young situation and saying how quote unquote toxic it is. Look, when both people are upset in a relationship, sometimes they do things that are uncharacteristic. They're upset. That doesn't mean that, you know, that doesn't mean that they're terrible people. They just do things out of anger. And I haven't really heard much of any great story from Trae Young or Trae Young between the relationship of Trae Young and Atlanta outside of them paying him. But I think that this is the last year we're going to see Trae Young in an Atlanta Hawks jersey. It just doesn't seem. It doesn't seem like. It seems like there's frustration on both sides. And it doesn't seem like neither side is willing to not only be honest with themselves, but be honest with the situation at hand. If you understand where you are, because again, I think that Atlanta is looking at Trae Young as you are a superstar, so we should be better than we are, even though, in my opinion, he's not. Or you're looking at him and saying, Trae Young, you led us to the conference championship. Why haven't we been anywhere since? Now, and again, you have to understand who Trae Young is. Trae Young is a offensive savant. And that's about it. And that's no offense or no disrespect to Trae Young. That's just honesty. I just think that this is going to be the last year. I could be wrong, obviously, but I think that this is going to be the last year that we see Trae Young in a Atlanta Hawks jersey. And I think that, I don't know if they'll be able to afford him, but you want to go to a team. Trae Young he's not one of those players that, as unfortunate as it is, I think superstars are the only players that you can honestly build a team around and they can be a championship caliber team. And again, I don't think Trae Young is that. I think Trae Young is great, but Trae Young, in my opinion, is a solid second option. And what I mean solid second option, I think he is a great first option, but I don't think he's a championship first option. I think he would be a championship second option. So you hear it now. I don't think they would be a championship caliber team if he went here. Let me first say that. But put Trae Young on someone like the San Antonio Spurs, where he is obviously not the first option. The first option is Victor Wembanyama. I think that you'd get the best out of Victor Wembanyama. I think that you get the best out of Trae Young. Say Trae Young went to the Lakers. I think that the Lakers have struggled mightily at the point guard position, and they struggle shooting the ball. Where you get both in one, you know. So it just feels like this is going to be the last year that Trae Young's in the Atlanta Hawks jersey. And it feels like this needs to be the last year because this marriage has run its course. So we'll see, though, man. I'm very interested because he's not the only player. He's not the only player like that. Like, obviously, we're not talking about it in this episode, but we'll see what happens with Klay Thompson at the end of this year. We'll see what happens with DeJounte Murray. I mean, he was just in trade talks. We'll see if he... I don't know, man. It's interesting to see. But we'll see. And lastly, before we go, the unpopular topic of the day. Now, I'm going to address this with seriousness, but I'm also going to bring a little bit of fun into it as well. We've all seen the Cam Newton video. We've all seen Cam Newton essentially getting jumped by grown men at his 7-on-7 camp, and essentially handling his own. Like, yeah. I'm just gonna rattle off some takes that I have from that video, from that situation. First and foremost, how? Give me a second. Give me a second, guys. I gotta check something out really quick. On Google, obviously Google isn't the end all be all. They could be wrong, but on Google, Cam Newton is 6'5", 245 pounds. Cam Newton was a professional football player. Cam Newton was a Heisman winner. Cam Newton was a national champion. Cam Newton was an MVP. And if I remember correctly, he was an offensive rookie of the year. In what world do you think that it is smart to try a man that was playing behind statistically one of the worst worst offensive lines in football? A man that is towering over you. Now, I get the whole point of jumping in that sense, but why? So now you look dumb because Cam Newton handled every single one of y'all expeditiously to the point where his hat didn't even come off. Do you understand the level of embarrassment that you have to have? The level of embarrassment that comes your way that an unsuccessful recorded jumping? Cam Newton's a game changer, bro. You may be able to jump a game manager, but you can't jump a game changer. That's crazy. But let me end this with seriousness. I'm not going to make this a black and white thing. What I will say is we have to do better as a people, as a generation. We have to do better. Think about this, man. I understand that things get heated between coaches, between parents, between players. But there's a way of representing yourself when you leave the house. There's a way of representing yourself in any situation that you're in. And you want to represent yourself in the best way possible, in the best light possible. Because honestly, your reputation is all that you have. And Cam Newton doesn't have to put on these things. Cam Newton doesn't have to do this 7-on-7 camp. Cam Newton doesn't have to do any of this. It's not going to take away from the money that Cam Newton's made in his professional career. It's not going to take away from who Cam Newton is. Cam Newton is doing this as a service. And to be a part of a service that Cam Newton is putting on because he, out the kindness of his heart, because a lot of these players in the 7-on-7 camp more than likely ain't getting an invitation nowhere else. So to go to a Cam Newton run event and try to jump the organizer is crazy. I don't remember who said it, but it's true. And this is where you have to make it about race. You don't hear this happening at the Peyton Manning what's his name? Peyton Manning, Eli Manning camp. You only hear this at the Trent Dilford camp. Why are we doing this at Cam Newton's camp? Why? I understand you may feel some type of way about Cam Newton, but where's the respect at? Why is there no respect? Or why is there such a disregard for respect for a person that is, honestly, whether he talk trash or not, he's doing a service to y'all? I understand that the video, I joked about it. A lot of people joked about it. The world joked about it. But in all seriousness, that's a terrible look. That is a terrible look. And the fact that these are grown men at a kid's 7-on-7 camp, foundation, whatever it is, or event. These are grown men trying to jump Cameron Newton at his own event is crazy. And then have the nerve to get on a podcast to quote unquote tell their side of the story like we didn't just freaking see it on camera. We just have to do better. We have to do better. Because how can somebody call themselves a role model or try to be a role model or try to be in charge of kids acting the way that they're acting? And the thing that sucks the most is the fact of this happens at black camp. This doesn't really happen, or it's not really publicized a lot, and it's not really shown a lot in white organizations like this, like the Peyton Manning, Eli Manning camp, which they've done much longer than Cam Newton's 7-on-7 thing. Yet and still, do you think Cam Newton woke up that day thinking that he was going to get jumped? You think Cam Newton woke up, said, the organization, this camp that I'm running, might get jumped. I might get jumped today. That's crazy. It's got to be better, man. Man. It's just crazy how adults at times can really hurt youth sports. I know that the youth get such a negative, especially today's youth, gets such a negative rap, but these are adults acting like this. And I commend Cam Newton because he's better than me. He is better than me. I'm led by my faith. I am a very spiritual person. God is the center of everything that I do, or at least I try to make him the center of everything I do. But I couldn't imagine if somebody jumping me and I have the advantage, ain't no way I am just not. I didn't see Cam Newton throw a punch. I just saw him swing a dude and put another dude in a headlock while holding off somebody else. If I'm Cam Newton, I'm getting, boy, we just have to do better, man. And it's unfortunate that adults continue to tarnish youth sports. As much as we talk about how the youth is this, the youth is that, we need to start having a serious conversation about how these parents, how these coaches, how these adults look worse and act worse than these kids. And there you have it. That's been today's episode of the Unpopular Podcast. I truly, truly, truly appreciate you guys. If you want a Popular Podcast shirt, hoodie, sweater, long sleeve joggers, the link is in the description below. I have multiple different colors, multiple different designs. Get your Unpopular Podcast merch today. Also, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. I'm trying to get as many subscribers as possible. I truly, truly appreciate you guys. Tell a friend to tell a friend if you like the comment or like the content to subscribe. It means a lot. Also, for all my DSPs listeners, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, please subscribe or follow wherever you're listening. You guys matter just as much as my YouTube audience, and it definitely would mean a lot if you guys like the content to subscribe. It wherever you listen, it means so much to me. And also follow the socials. Follow Instagram. Follow TikTok. I post pretty much daily. Like, comment. We can debate. I enjoy it. Just follow the socials. And until next time, much love.